All right, welcome back to the Common Sense Show. I know what you're thinking. Ben isn't the last people that we spoke to, and you're right, he's not. We have a double header today, a back-to-back podcast episode. So you're in it for the long haul with me. I'll hear no complaining from you today, but we have a great topic that we're going to talk about today. Let me first introduce to you Ben Hakama. He's the founder of Illuminate Wealth Management based in Chicago. And if you don't believe me, he has snow right over his shoulder to convince you that he's in Chicago. Ben's passionate about helping the everyday person to succeed in today's financial landscape, and it is getting harder and harder every year. I mean, I did a private show, Ben, and I did one about just the struggles that everyday folks are facing with the increase in prices and food and all the other stuff. And it is really hard for some people out there. People thinking about changing careers and moving their whole families. It's just getting really tough. So your presence today is going to be a beacon, a light in the darkness right now, and hopefully not a canary in a coal mine. So that would be right. That's how I think it's going to go today. But Ben, can you explain? Welcome to the show, and can you explain a little bit about yourself to the folks who are listening and watching?
Yeah, Micah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. Love your intro, the sound and everything that's going on there. I think it's great, really catchy. So I started Illuminate Wealth Management right before COVID, January 1st, 2020. Before that, I worked for over a decade at another independent financial planner firm and was a minority partner there. But I really left and launched Illuminate with exactly what you described there at the beginning. There is so much information out there. There's so many things. We're pulled in all sorts of directions, whether you're a business owner or a parent, or you're caring for your parents. There's just so many things that are pulling us and telling us, oh, I have the right way. And unfortunately, I think the world has framed it in a way that you should feel shame that you can't do it all. And honestly, we all need help in some way. And so we just work with clients. My youngest client's fresh out of college, and oldest client unfortunately passed away last year, but he was 97. So we've seen it all, like everything that happens in life, every life stage. Over my career, we've worked with people through kind of everything. So, with that, we can go any direction you want, but
Yeah, it's true. It's so hard right now for people to try to figure out what to manage. I guess if we're gonna get into the nitty gritty and the nuance of it, it's really when the economy is good and roaring, and the cost of goods are lower, and there's not as much inflationary pressure being put on households. It's a bit easier to understand the nuances of kind of where you can apply your family cash. It gets much harder when 15% more of the cash that you bring in, given that you are a W-2 employee, has to be reallocated, because unfortunately, if you have a business, the good part is that you can apply some marketing dollars to your business operation, and then offset a 15% increase in lifestyle expenses by a 15% hopefully increase in revenue. But you can't always do that if you have a job. And so what have you, and of course, I guess the answer, maybe it depends what you'll tell me. How have you been directing or encouraging families to what to focus on? And when they need money, where do they get it from? If they're starting to feel squeezed?
Yeah, it's definitely different if you're W-2 versus a business owner and have some control. The clients that seem to weather through the storms the best, honestly, have one spouse that's W-2 and one that's an owner, and you get the benefits of both, and then the negatives of both too, but you get to balance each other out. Number one is just knowing where your money's going, right? It's the boring, like, budgeting cash flow stuff that no one wants to talk about. I mean, that's the health of your finances, both whether you're a business owner or your personal finance. It's what money's coming in and where's it going. You only have so much control over it. You mentioned, costs going up and things. I was an economics major, and big thing that just from a political perspective people talked about is no one likes to see recessions and unemployment go up, but it only affects really a smaller percentage of the population, everybody feels inflation and everybody hates inflation. And so
Right.
even though the government will tell you the inflation numbers have come down right now, which is from an economic view completely true, the problem with inflation is once prices go up, they don't come back. So even if prices aren't raising anymore,
Right.
we're stuck with this, and this is kind of the
Yeah.
new reality. And so getting a handle on where's your money going, what's coming in, what's going out, what can you get rid of, where are you wasting money, and then where can you save money on taxes? Honestly, taxes are the low hanging fruit for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Your W-2 or business owner, let's make sure we use the tax code the best of your ability, and find ways to just not pay Uncle Sam more than you have to.
One way to think about it, I think, is if we're going to be just pure logical about it. Let's say that inflation increased by 8%, which drove a rise in supply chain costs for a business. Also, just coincidentally by 8%, right? They just
Right.
happen to be both at 8%, which is not usually what happens, by the way. But in my scenario, it is. So the business decides to raise their prices 10%. Now, let's say that the cost of supplies goes down because some of that inflation was eased, and it went back to the 5% that it cost you to get these supplies from the 8%. Businesses are not going to be inclined, if they know that the customers are willing to pay that extra 10% on top of the cost, to reduce their costs 10%. Number one, not just, don't assume it's because of greed, but it's also because of fear, right? That they think that if the inflation can go up 8%, it could very well go up 12%. And then they're stuck. And the worst thing in the marketplace are for business prices to be completely blowing in the wind whenever the government enacts something that requires inflation to go up, or a policy or a strategy or taxes. And so I think it's so important, I think, to kind of crystallize, like, talking to you, Ben, of course, like why it is that people might feel like, oh, well, inflation has gone down a bit, but I haven't seen it. Like, these businesses, they just must be so greedy. And it's not necessarily the case, because in addition to inflation issues, you have, for instance, in 2024, there's a lot of minimum wage changes that are coming across something like 12 states that are going to drastically increase labor costs for businesses. So those prices aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, and I think understanding inflation and how that affects you as you age. So I mentioned I had a client who was 97. He still remembered what prices were like in the 70s and 80s.
Oh,
and so
good way to get depressed.
Right, exactly. And so part of what happens is prices in general go up every year.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're going up a smaller amount. And you notice it 10 years later, like, man, I remember when things were so much cheaper 10 years ago. Well, the older you get and the longer you're doing this and the longer you're spending money, you will see that the other piece, and this is just the world where we live in, and we have to kind of take that into account. The things that are discretionary, the TVs, the technology, those prices actually aren't going up that much. If you look at the last 10, 20 years, the things that we need are going up substantially faster than the average inflation. So that's things like childcare and healthcare costs, both premiums, but also just going to the doctor and what it costs out of pocket. All the things, and college expenses, all that is going up a lot faster than the general inflation. And so depending how you're spending your money, and how much extra income you have, how much of your money is spent towards fixed expenses you can't control versus how much is on discretionary, will really change your view of the economy and how prices are affecting you. If everything's fixed and those are the costs going up fastest, you're going to feel it the most, and you're going to feel a whole lot poorer than you did a year ago or 2 years ago. But if you have extra room in your budget, you can make a slight change, not spend as much or just not save as much, and you actually won't feel a lifestyle change whatsoever when those fixed costs go up a lot more than the discretionary costs.
And it's an excellent point, because the thing about the reported 7% inflation rate, it's not 7% for you, because there are categories where inflation is up 20%, and then there's categories where inflation is at 3%, right? Like, it all depends on what you're buying, right? So, for instance, you could be buying milk versus meat versus vegetables, right? And then across that, you're paying very different cost and that increase. And it was an excellent point about the stuff that's necessary to just live are going up because you can't skirt those costs. They're going to be there regardless. So you talk about planning for dual income families, and I find this to be interesting because everyone's financial makeup is different. So in my family, my wife is a W-2 and I am not. I'm self-employed. And we've been this way for 2 decades now that we've been married, which is a long time now. That is like forever in today's environment. But yeah, so like, my wife has somewhat gotten used to the idea that my personal revenue through my businesses are going to be more up and down. And hers is obviously flat because, she's a W-2, but of course I have spikes, right? Where some years it's like, this is absolutely fantastic. We're on like level 9. And then some years it's just like, why did I get married? Right. To this guy who likes to be an entrepreneur. How have you counseled couples that have those differences in income versus like 2 W-2s versus 2 self-employed individuals?
Right. So there's so many different layers there, and I kind of want to start at the foundation. So the foundation is how you view about money and communicate with your spouse. So regardless of where you fall on that, are you W-2, are you self-employed, or anywhere in between, maybe you have 17 jobs, a bunch of side jobs out there, whatever it is, the way you think about money is ingrained in you from how you grew up, what you saw your parents do. Did you have food insecurity and financial insecurity, or did you have more than enough and got everything that you ever wanted and were never told no? Well, the way you view money and what money is used for is going to be dramatically different. So when you have a relationship, whether you're married or not, and you're sharing some cost and you're sharing some income, you would now have 2 people with 2 wildly different views. So just like we talk about, if you're going to get married, you probably should have some sort of marriage counseling or at least be on the same page for values. Money is one thing a lot of people still have a taboo talking about. They don't want to talk about it with their spouse. They don't want to reveal the things they've done wrong or they're ashamed of. But that needs to be at the foundation. And before you even get to where's the income coming in, how do you view about it? So one framework I think works really well is just a simple conversation on do you view money more of having wealth is security? I feel more secure, safe by having it. Or do you view more in an opportunity? It allows us to either take more risks, take more trips, spend more money, whatever it is. And then the third one that some people have is a vulnerability. Having money makes me vulnerable to scams or people are going to take advantage of me. Having just a simple conversation with your spouse about that goes a really long way of understanding the other one. So you mentioned your spouse. My wife is the furthest on the security side, and I'm probably the furthest on the opportunity side. And so I know when we talk about money in our house, we need to talk about both the security and the opportunity, and we need to be on the same page. So what I have found is a lot of entrepreneurs, they're all on the opportunity side. They're risk takers. They're happy to take some risks. But if you have one spouse that's more security, the key for planning for the dual income family is let's make sure we've built the foundation, enough cash in the bank, even if the risk taker says that is a wasted opportunity. Think about how much more we can make in the stock market or reinvesting in the business or some other avenue. But once you've established that foundation and you have the conversation, let's build on that. Let's also lean into the other side, the opportunity side. Okay, we've checked the box for the security. What else can we do? So we can go way more in depth, but I'll just stop talking for a second and let you respond to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fascinating because I think that you're right. The messaging, how my wife and I communicate about money is very different. And what's so funny is that you can be a contradiction as well within yourself. As an example, we both tend to be more long-term thinkers, but how we think about long-term is different as well, right? So like, like the whole stable security, plot as you go, stable income, organized future planning orientation is her, and I am the more risk-taking, investing. okay to be broke today to be rich later,
Mhm.
right? Kind of mindset where you're just like investing in an opportunity investing, or in businesses and like putting your sweat equity and blah blah blah. And over the years, we have two kids, and so over the years, some of that risk taking has to take a backseat to the fact that you have children, and you have obligations that need to currently be met in order for the family to be okay. Um, but you're right, absolutely right. I think messaging is really important, but understanding what your financial language is, like individually, because only by understanding that financial language are you going to be able to understand how you're going to get along and where you're going to get aggravated and where there's going to be arguing and tension.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have it. I think it tends to be better for communication to have joint finances for the majority, but even if you choose not to, it's all about communication. And so understanding where the other's at, what are the things going to aggravate them or annoy them if you're going to do it in a certain way, whatever it is, have the right parameters when you need to talk about it. I think goes a long way in the harmony at home when it comes to
Mhm.
finances. If we take it a step further and talk about, okay, how do you actually plan? What are the actual things you can do? It is a great opportunity as a financial planner to have someone who's both, just like your family. One's W-2, one is self-employed. And as much of the fixed expenses that you can cover with the W-2 is ideal. So if we can align, when you think about the cash flow, you've got fixed expenses you have to pay. You've got to pay for the health insurance and the housing costs and the things that, pay off some debt, whatever it is, the things you have to pay every month, no matter what. If you can have as much of that kind of almost compartmentalized into this is what the W-2 is going towards, that will help you then weather through the times when things are great or not so great in the business, because now it's discretion and your lifestyle, hopefully you can change enough because it's discretionary. You don't eat out as much. You don't take as
Mhm.
many trips when times aren't as good in the business,
Right.
because you can dial back and just kind of think about it from, as a family, what I'm trying to provide is the long term and the opportunity, and the discretionary as a business owner, and the W-2 side is keeping us moving forward in a steady way.
Right. One thing that I think seems to give angina to people is like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it on social media, which is by 20, you need to have this much money
Ah,
saved. By 30, this, 40, this, 50, this, 60, this. And it's just like, does, it's number one, is too simple. Like, it doesn't take into account a variety of factors. But really, what do you think should be the goal as opposed to a specific age thing? And not to steer your answer, but just to kind of frame it, like, what should be the goal? Should it be by decade? Should it just be what you can? Should it be the kind of life that you want when you retire, like based off of the activities you enjoy? What should be the metric?
so I get really angry when I see these studies or the rules of thumb, because the first thing that my mind goes to, and I've seen it with enough clients over the years, it's so easy. We compare ourselves to other people,
Hmm.
but no one else has the same life or values that you do.
Right.
There's no one else. And so, um, who cares what the median or the average person is going to have at a certain age that you should have at this point? Stop shooting yourself.
Hmm.
Let's go ahead and figure out what actually works for you. And so
Hmm.
for some people, that is, I don't want a traditional retirement. I
Right.
want to enjoy life today and tomorrow, and I want to have a kind of a balanced view of both work and work-life balance. And so
Hmm.
it's going to last my whole life. And so I plan to be working till I die, but I also am not going to delay gratification too much. Other people have a more traditional approach, and they say, I'm doing this because I want to be financially independent. I
Right.
don't want to have to earn another dollar, and then I'm going to stop, and
Hmm.
I'm not going to work again when I don't need to. I hate my
Hmm.
job. It's not fulfilling. Here's these other things that I do. Wherever you fall is different than everybody else. And however
Right.
you feel about your job, where it is today, where it is in the future, what you view as success for your family.
Hmm.
So again, if we go back to, planning for dual income, you need to get on the same page as your spouse. What's our plan that we're building towards? And then once you have a plan, a goal in mind, then you can back into what the numbers look like. The math, honestly, is not that hard. Like most of the stuff I'm doing, the technical math side
Yeah.
is not that complicated.
Mhm.
It's getting to the what really matters. That's the heart and soul of it.
Yeah. So you talk about defining what is enough. Like when does a person know when enough is enough? And I decided to ask this question now because it kind of bridges what we're talking about. Like, how do you know when enough is enough? Because here's the thing: it's like it's not just about the thought of having enough. It's I'm not going to have enough, and how do I know? Right? I feel like it goes both ways. And how do you define that?
So there's two ways. First one, I like with every one of my new clients, we talk about what I call the $1 billion question. If you woke up tomorrow and you had $1 billion in your accounts, and I choose $1 billion because it's such a big number, no one could spend that realistically.
Mhm.
If you had $1 billion, tell me about what your life, how your life is different. What are you doing that you couldn't do before? What are you stopping doing? Are you going to go to work? Are you changing your job? Are you going to go and say, I really wish that I went to law school, so I'm going to just go do that because who cares if I even make money off of it?
Right.
Figure out what that is. That helps you define, once you take money off the table, what could life be?
Mhm.
Now we put money back on. It's a limiting factor for all of us in some way. So now let's put that back on and let's build towards, okay, what is the bare minimum I need to get to towards this, if I had $1 billion financially independent goal. And then you've got kind of got different layers. And so then you can define enough as a little bit nuanced. What is enough to survive?
Mhm.
And then what is enough to be content? And what is enough
Mhm.
to have truly, we'll never need another dollar. It's not $1 billion, it's some lower number. But now you have kind of 2 or 3 different measurements of what enough actually is. But it's geared towards not a dollar amount. It's what life could look like. And
Right.
then the dollar amount kind of takes care of itself.
There are so many um, acronyms, these initialisms for people's financial goals now. You have the DINK movement, the dual income, no kids movement. I
Yep.
see these people online, and we could talk about the psychology of the DINK movement, and then we have the FIRE movement, right? Financially independent, retire early. And maybe I'm missing one, but like, do you think that kind of like yielding yourself to a philosophy like that, financial philosophy like that, is that a healthy way to look at financial management?
I think it works for 1% of the people who view it and try it. And so there are certain mindsets and certain people that whatever it is, you want to be extreme fire movement, you're going to cut everything out, do the
Mhm.
bare minimum, and you're happy and fulfilled by that. Awesome. That is
Mhm.
not the majority of people,
Yeah.
but that's what it's sold as. And here's what life could be. So many people are running from something when they adopt these kind of extreme diets. They're running
Mhm.
from their life as it is now rather than really getting to the heart of running to something that matters, and
Yeah.
something that matters to them. So for 99% of the people in my experience that have tried any of these acronyms,
Mhm.
they are not doing it with the right mindset, and
Yeah.
therefore it's not successful in actually accomplishing what they want. Which what people want is they want money to just be a tool to the goal, to the life that they want. It's
Right.
not the end all be all, but if you just focus on the fire movement of getting the dollar on the spreadsheet, that's not going to be fulfilling at the end of the day. You're going to get there and say, now what? And so whether it's people that really do retire early, or I've had clients that didn't answer that question, but they got to the age 65, they said,
Mhm.
that's when I'm going to retire. And they retired. And within 18 months, they're back to work because they didn't retire to something. They just
Right.
retired from something.
Mhm.
They're not fulfilled. And that whole goal of I've saved and delayed gratification, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. That is what really matters. Money is just a tool to get us there.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think with business, building a business, if you are self-employed, or when it comes to how you spend money, it's all mindset. It's all mental, right? It's all, what do I want? Why am I building this business? And one of the things I've talked about so many times in my podcast is, okay, you want to start a business, but you want to start a business to get away from your boss. That's a terrible reason to start a business.
Absolutely.
It's like the worst reason that you could actually have to start a business. Like, just because you don't want to deal with the person with the personality that doesn't mesh with yours. How about you get to you understand how to deal with other people? Maybe you take that on as a project of some kind, because maybe it's not your boss. Maybe your boss gets along with everybody else. Maybe your boss and you don't get along, and that's something that you have to think about, right? So, you're right. Like, there's so much at play, and people are looking for formulas. It's like, Ben, teach me how to retire. Teach me how to retire a millionaire. I want to retire a millionaire, and then I want to do the 4% rule for the rest of my life, and then I'll be good. But really, like you said, it's mentality. And what I find interesting is that show, The Lottery Changed My Life, really kind of puts this to the forefront, right? Because it starts off by saying, in a disclaimer in that show, that something like 80 or 90% of the people who have won the lottery and won some serious money end up poor again within a certain amount of years, or in the same financial state that they were in previously, because it doesn't change who you are and what you do and how you function, right? It only adds, it just enhances who you are and what you do and how you function, right? For a short period of time. So part of, you talk about retiring, leaving a legacy, being, contributing to the workplace and society in general. How do you train your kids, if you have them, about money? Because this is a really important thing. And most of the people now say, oh, my parents never taught me about money, so I don't know if I'm the right source. But how do you make it so that when your children get older, that they at least have a framework of reference to manage their own lives?
Yeah, it's something I've never actually heard somebody, honestly, an adult today, say, I had great education on money from a source. You
Right.
figure it out once you start getting the paycheck and you go blow it on something, the next day. And then you're like, oh, I don't have any money anymore. What happened with all that? All that work went to nothing. Or I remember, I had a job at Jimmy John's, and I didn't get paid that much because I spent it all on the food at Jimmy John's. Like, you learn
Yeah.
about it
True.
from experience. And so if we can help train our kids just on the basic understanding of money and have a healthy relationship with money, I think that's really important. So it goes all the way back to, if you've got a 3 to 5 year old, you can start the conversations. It's not about getting into the math, but it's, hey, I'm at the grocery store, and this is why I'm deciding to buy this can of soup versus this can of soup. You talk it out. Let's normalize the thinking and let them experience that. Now, a lot of parents will tell me, yes, but I've made a lot of mistakes. I don't want to share that with my kids. I don't want them to see, or I don't want them to see how much I make. You don't have to do that, but you've lived your life just like every other part of parenting. You know what you wish you would have done better. And so let's apply that to the money too. So I mentioned 3 to 5 year olds, you can just start the conversation. If, elementary school, 6 to 10, having an allowance, it doesn't have to be a big number. You can set it up a whole sort of different ways, but just to start letting them make mistakes early, so
Right.
that, and get the sense for spenders and savers. So I have 2 kids, and they're both elementary school, 8 and 10. And one of them is a spender. If she's got money, it's gone the next day. The other one will not spend money. He is a saver. He wants to have money. Well, so okay, I already know one's the security, one's the opportunity side. So both of them, to the extreme, is negative. So my job as a parent today is to have the conversations and help the spender save just a small amount. Always have some money in the bank, and let me help the saver enjoy life a little bit, because that money's not doing any good just by having it. And just having those conversations to that level of elementary school really helps of setting balance. It's all about balance. Once you get into, middle school, high school, and then college, helping understand the way taxes work, even if you don't understand all yourself. Let's sit
Mhm.
down together and do TurboTax together. Don't
Yep.
do it for them.
Mhm.
Do it, use it as a teaching tool, learning how to create a budget, understanding just fixed expenses versus variable expenses. Like there's just a lot of things as they grow and develop that you can help with, but normalizing those conversations super early is the most important thing in my mind, because
Mhm.
now you're the resource they can go to, and they won't just go make mistakes without having a safety net to talk about.
And they'll be able to see the contrast between you and your spouse if you guys are different,
Yes.
right? Too, because like my wife is very, she looks at her bank account every day. She's very regimented with that stuff. I look at my bank account twice a month. Like it's
Yeah.
not interesting to me, right? Like I like investing. I like the investment part where like, where you get there's the risk and then you can grow, or the risk and then you grow. But the daily money management, like that's for the birds. Like I'm not
Yep.
I couldn't have less interest if you had I just couldn't. She loves that. She hates the long-term stuff. I love the long-term stuff, So but like it's interesting because I see the same thing in our kids, right? Like my daughter, she's definitely a spender. Like she
Yeah.
like, and now that she's 17, so like now that she has a job, it's like DoorDash and all this stuff.
Yep.
Like there's food coming to the door like every other day. And I'm
Right.
like, who ordered food? We're cooking dinner, right?
Right.
And then my son, he's 14, so he's more like, he's just like the saver. He wanted a PlayStation 5. I said, great. I'm not buying you a PlayStation 5,
Right.
but you can earn it. So he went out, he earned it, and he had money saved already, and he was willing to save for it, and he did not spend $1 until he got it. Right.
Yep.
I said, if you can make it to this amount of money, and then I'll put in this amount, but you have to get there first. And he was fine eating at home and not spending his money on other stuff. And for him, that he felt comfortable in the management aspect of it. And so I think you're right. But for both of them, I opened up checking accounts for them early.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a big boon, like to teach them how money goes into the bank.
Absolutely.
And then I ran the compound interest simulation on them.
Perfect.
Right. I had my checkbook. I wrote a check for $1 million, and then I had a penny, and I put it on the table, and then I said, okay, which do you want, the check for $1 million, or do you want the penny
doubled every day? Yeah.
Doubled every day for 30 days. Which one, and so like I ran that to them, and that seemed like a really eye-opening one for them when they saw how much money you could have when it's doubled over time. Are there certain games that you would play with the kids, or do you think it's just all about like reps and practice?
Oh, I mean, honestly, a lot of it's about practice and recognizing the best way to learn, whether it's money or anything else, is by making mistakes, right? That's when you remember the most. And so allowing the freedom to make those mistakes. Some, more math oriented kids really get the compound interest piece, but others, you need to actually do it in practice, where you say, you know what, every dollar you're going to save, I'm going to double it. I'll put that in, and
Right.
up to a limit. And then they see, oh, look at that. Like, look how quickly this thing is growing in value to do it that way. Those are some just like create some scenarios that they'll see in real life with much bigger numbers. And let's do that while they're kids at home. One big mistake I've seen a lot of parents that have enough, they've got good income, they've got a good amount of wealth, and they're able, they don't need to create scarcity for their kids. They can give them anything that they want. And they remember, I've got a lot of clients this way. They remember what it was like to not have, and they don't want their kids to experience that. The problem is, move forward when that kid's in their 20s and they've never had to make the tough choices.
Yeah.
And now they're 25, they've got a job, they're somewhat on their own, and they're only able to get by relying on mom and dad, because that's the only way they've lived their life, and they can't make those tough decisions because they've never had to. As hard as it is, we need to set some boundaries and make sure, hey, if your daughter's doing DoorDash, that better be on her money, doesn't have your credit card, right? And it doesn't mean you can't treat them, but having direct consequences while they're still in your home is going to protect them from the huge mistakes that I see all the time in their 20s. And also remember this. So something like, I don't know, $15 trillion is going to be inherited by next
Mhm.
generations the next 25 years. So whether they earn it or not, there's a lot of people that are going to inherit money at different ages. And if
Right.
you don't know how to manage your money on small amounts,
Right.
it's just going to compound the problem when you get bigger amounts, just like your lottery
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. It's so funny that people's ability to manage money and wealth is extremely different. Like there are people who make, you know, what $60,000 a year, and just they both have cars and they have a home that they're paying off and they have no credit card debt, but they have like ridiculous, absurd credit limits because they manage that money. And then there's people who are making like three, four, $500,000 a year, and they always appear to be living check to check. And of course, the millionaire next door talks about prestigious accumulators of wealth and then under accumulators of wealth, and how under accumulators of wealth tend to have dependent children when they get older as well, as a consequence of them living paycheck to paycheck, spending on
Mhm.
frivolous things oftentimes, which makes them under accumulators of wealth. Is that something that you see? Is that um like a constant for you, like a that you see in your practice?
Income really doesn't matter all that much once you get above a certain level. So
Mm.
income matters,
Yep.
absolutely.
Right.
But once you hit, I think 60s, or depending where you live, a good number,
Mhm.
maybe it's 100 in certain areas of the country, right? But
Right.
once you hit those numbers, the difference in success is entirely psychological. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. It's
Mm.
how are you able to delay gratification, understand compound interest,
Mhm.
put automatic things. The number one thing I recommend to people is put automated savings. So, for instance, I have 5 places my paycheck goes
Mm.
automatically. I don't have to manually do anything. So I don't have to log into account. I'm just like you. I don't want to
Right.
log in. I don't want to see it. I just know it's going where it's supposed to go and I move on with my life. Right.
Right.
So that includes retirement accounts and a couple different savings accounts for different purposes so
Mhm.
that we can, as a family, compartmentalize and talk about it. Automation is key, avoiding mistakes. All that is psychological. It's not how much money do you make and bring in. And yes, there's things on the margin with taxes and
Right.
different strategies you can do, but it all
Mhm.
starts with the psychology.
Yeah, it's so true. What's funny is like I've heard that described for people, for instance, who are making like let's say 150,000 a year, and then now they're earning millions of dollars a year. They say that they don't feel like there was a difference. Um, they so they were driving a nice car at 100 grand a year. They're driving a really nice car maybe at $1 million a year, but like their difference in lifestyle has not changed that much. They were still able to go on 2 vacations a year at $150,000
Mhm.
dollars a year, and then just the places that they can go at $1 million maybe changes, but they're still doing the 2 vacations that they were doing at 150,000. So, like, I mean, it's it's so true. It's such a
If
true point.
if we bring it back to something we said earlier, if your measurement of success or your happiness is based on how you compare to other people, there will
Yeah.
always be somebody else who's making more than you, and there's always
Mm.
going to be somebody else who's spending more than you. And so if you're not happy, again, assuming you've crossed that income level where you have enough, right?
Right.
Um, if you're not happy because you're seeing on social media somebody else, or you've got a friend who always talks about the vacations they take, and you're like,
Mhm.
why can't I do that? If your measurement of success and contentment is somebody else, you're not going to be happy no matter how much money you make. You make $10
Yeah.
million a year, there's going to be somebody making 15 who's
Mhm.
spending more money and drives a nicer car or
Right.
whatever it looks like. And so again, it's all psychology.
It's funny because it's like you never know the person's financial situation. They
No.
could be so over leveraged driving a better car than you, or for instance, they could be like like you talked about essentially value sets, right? So for instance, maybe they have a better car than you, but maybe you go on way nicer vacations than they do,
Yeah.
and they just don't like traveling, but they enjoy driving a nicer car. It's so interesting putting things like that in perspective. I want to go back to something that you said earlier about retirement and how people come back from working. It's because it's something that I've said before and something I've talked to my dad about because my dad's close to retirement age. Not close. He's past retirement age. He's one of those guys that like working just to work. I've noticed that when people love working, they tend to look younger than people who like kind of like retire.
Yep.
It's just something that's good for the soul about working. But if you don't have a hobby before you retire, you decide to retire, you're kind of mentally screwed, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's the people that retire to something, whether it's a hobby, it's a volunteer position, it's it's something that's keeping their mind going, that's active, that is exciting to them. Those are the ones
Mhm.
that live a long time.
Right.
The ones that don't either go back to work because they have no other purpose in life, or they have relationship issues
Mm.
because they're taking out their depression. Honestly, there's a depression crisis for retirement, and also divorce. If you look statistics, the number one area or age bracket that's getting divorced at a higher pace is 65 to 75, and it's because
Wow.
you retire and you don't know your purpose outside of what you've defined it in your work, and you
Mhm.
don't have hobbies, and you get depressed and you take it out on your spouse. And
Mhm.
that is something that before you retire, as much as you can do, whether it's a therapist or if you're able to do it yourself, talk through, figure out the values, figure out what life looks like, describe life, ideally, if you didn't have to get up and go to work. And,
Right.
and build towards that. Those are the people that are happiest and most content in retirement. The ones that don't, they go back to work and they work till they die and they're not happy about it, or they die within a couple years of retirement.
Right. So no matter whether a family is, W-2 and solopreneur or entrepreneur, or two W-2s or two entrepreneurs, what are some basic rules of the road for finance for in families? Or and by family, I also mean a single individual without
Mhm.
who's not married. What are some of the basic um, rules of the road for households to manage their finances?
Mhm. So again, I'll kind of describe in kind of tiers. So the first one is just understanding your money, right? Where's
Mhm.
it going? What are you spending it on? That's the foundation for everything. It's a foundation for health of a business. It's a foundation for health of your personal finances. Once you kind of have that figured out, one mistake I see a lot of dual income families make is not maximizing the company benefits. So if you have two
Mhm.
sets of health insurance plans, two sets of retirement plans, two sets of just whatever those, cafeteria plan benefits that you have, coordinating those together is a huge opportunity that a lot of people just don't even think about. You get open enrollment, it's the end of the year, and you're worried about, the holidays upcoming, and you just check the boxes, keep it the same as last year, and don't take some time to look at it. They aren't super complicated for the most part. Once you get into deferred comp and things like that, it can be more
Right.
complicated. But coordinating benefits is a kind of low hanging fruit that I've seen.
Mhm.
And then also
Mhm.
just understanding the taxation. A lot of people misunderstand the way, marginal taxes work, that there's nothing wrong with getting a bonus. You want to get the bonus, you're getting more money,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
because it's being withheld at a higher rate. Coordinating all those pieces is difficult, but if you take time to talk about it with your spouse or with a financial planner who knows what they're doing, um, there's a lot of low hanging fruit there of just,
Right.
if you notice, a lot of what I'm saying is communication and just
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah. That makes sense. Um. So it's funny that it all comes down to very simple concepts to actually to make big change in
Yes.
your finances and consistency. It seems like was what you're saying is that like just choose a path and stay on that path and be consistent with be like ruthlessly consistent. And that will
Absolutely.
move the needle than anything else, right? Um,
Yeah,
good.
it's from a technical. I said this before. From a technical standpoint, honestly, a lot of it's not that hard. It's the execution that's the
Mm,
challenge, and it's actually following through and then not blowing yourself up. Avoiding the big mistakes
mm,
is very important. Make sure that you're saving money. Like honestly, it sounds so simple. Just save some money, right? I
right.
mean, I mean, having some extra so you're not living exactly to the dollar, paycheck to paycheck. You've got
Yeah.
some money going somewhere else. It's those simple things. It's just doing it right and doing it consistently that really moves the needle at the end of the day.
I bet you're challenging yourself and kind of creating a game of it. Like, so for instance, like maybe this week I can save $100 from my paycheck and then live outside of the $100, and then maybe in the month from, and I can do that each week, and then next month maybe I can save $150 a week from my paycheck and just live outside of that, and
I've got a client who she's retired and widowed, but she gives me a number every year of this is what I expect to spend. And then she literally has a game of it to get under that number. And she wants to maximize her life but still being under the number. And she can afford to spend double what she tells me she's going to spend.
Right.
But it's the game aspect. That's why she has the money she has, is because she's gamified, and that's what works for her. Other people, they like to use things like whether it's YNAB, which is a personal finance software, where they have a number up there that says how old is your money, and you want that number to be bigger and bigger, gamifying it that way, or having I want to first save to have 1 month of expenses. Okay, now that I've hit that, now I want to save to have 6 months. Now I want to save to have a year. Just defining what you're saving towards, how long that can last. I think for a lot of people, especially younger, that are decades from retirement, they say, I don't want to save for retirement. Like, it's so far in the future. So instead, let's go shorter term. Let's save to have a year's worth of expenses. I don't care what type of accounts. Just, you could be out of work for a year and you'd be fine.
Right.
Great. Let's invest that. It's going to keep growing. It's going to compound over decades. That's awesome. It's a great start. And then let's just keep building on that. Expand how long you could live off your money. That alone helps gamify and make it more real today.
And before we look at the TikToks and get your professional opinion on TikToks, what if someone feels like they're not making enough money to be able to do this? What have you suggested that people do? For instance, maybe they're working hard, maybe full time, and they just and despite their best efforts, they don't feel like they're getting ahead, because even though they're pretty serious about saving what they can, but they still don't feel like there's enough there. What recommendations have you made?
So as much as possible, as early as possible, that you can get out of debt is number one. Let's reduce that. That is the biggest factor I've seen. It ties to the 50-30-20 rule. 50%, up to 50% should be fixed expenses, 30% variable. That leaves 20% for saving and long-term investment. If you're over 50%, especially with debt, it's very hard. That's when I found most clients feel they can't do anything, is because they have too much in fixed expenses. So maybe that means you got to take a step back, move to a less expensive area or a smaller home, or rent differently. Reducing fixed first helps free up the cash flow to then build towards the future that you want. Fixed is the most important factor. So that's where I would kind of start. It all goes back to both cash flow, but also a lot of people, finance gurus would say, go get a side hustle. That only matters if you understand your money and where it's going. That extra income, if it's still all going to too high of a fixed expenses, you're going to be fine. I've got clients that are doctors that are have $1 million homes, and their fixed expenses are way too high because they spent way too much on a home. And they say, why can't I save more money? It all comes down to your fixed are too high. You've taken off more than you can at this stage of wealth that you're at. And so I know it's a challenging conversation to have with yourself and admit, maybe I took on too much, whether it's student loans, consumer debt, mortgage, whatever that is. But reducing fixed is the easiest way. And then obviously, if you've done that and you've got it as low as you can and you're still not there, you will have to add some income in some way. But now you have a goal of where you need to get to. And if that's 50% fixed, okay, you can do the math. How much more income do I need to bring in to get under that number?
Yeah, it's funny. And that makes sense because everyone thinks about adding. It's all about adding, right? Adding income. But even if you have to go out and work for it, like side hustle style, and bring in more income, the reality is that it's almost similar to winning the lottery, right? It's more money, but if the mindset doesn't change, then nothing changes.
Exactly.
Even with the extra income.
I had a client who they had some credit card debt they'd accumulated over years. We helped them. We actually took a 401k loan because that was the best. That was really the only way to really reduce it. And not recommending that. It was a very unique situation. We took it out. Unfortunately, in practice, they didn't make the lifestyle changes they needed to. And quickly, they started accumulating more debt more credit card debt. And, we put some automated things in place, but in practice, they couldn't limit themselves to what it was. And so that led to some more extreme things we had to do to help them protect them from themselves.
Right.
It all comes down to mindset and psychology.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, let's go to our TikToks and see what you think about these TikTokers' financial advice.
Wonderful.
Yeah. All my experts love this.
These are the 5 bank accounts everyone should have by the time they're 30, and if you don't ever want to go broke. And yes, you can save this video for later. First is your checking account, and this should only be used for 18 withdrawals and paying off necessary monthly expenses. Second is a high yield savings account, not a regular one. High yield savings accounts give you 3 to 5% interest compared to 0.01% from a regular savings. Here are my favorite ones that you can screenshot. Third is an individual retirement account like a Roth IRA, traditional IRA, or a TFSA. All of these have tax advantages, and here are some of my favorite brokers that you can look into. 4 is an employee-sponsored retirement account like a 401k or 403b. Sometimes you can get an employee match, meaning you get free money. 5 is an individual taxable brokerage account. These accounts let you continue to invest, have no contribution limits, and there are no early withdrawal penalty fees. Follow to see my next video where I talk about...
Okay, he gave us his 5. What do you think?
In theory, those are all great ones. I would agree. You don't want to leave too much money in your checking account. High yield savings, great. I would not put an IRA that high up, individual retirement account, for multiple reasons. But the number one that I've seen is people like flexibility. And if you have too much going to retirement that you can't touch till you're 59 and a half without penalties, and you don't have enough in the individual brokerage, taxable savings, high yield savings, you also don't have the ability to take advantage of opportunities. If you're an opportunity person, you don't have you're not able to go and buy a home if you can afford it because you don't have the cash. It's all tied up in retirement. So that's the one I would probably put a lot further down the list and only fund if you need to. 401k, especially to the company match, like that's free money. Over and above, though, just like the IRA, if you have the money and everything else in your financial plan is in place, awesome. Let's go to the max you can to the 401k. But over the match, you got to be really intentional because it's good for tax savings. But if you have a spending problem, you don't want to be going into consumer debt because you wanted to fully fund your 401k. Right. And so, but overall, I think pretty good list there.
And then the other thing too is if you go up to the match, like you said, then it still leaves room to grow your money if you have a brokerage account because you can buy some ETFs and
absolutely,
if you're not planning on buying anything anytime soon, that money over the next 3 months could grow to the tune of 10 to 15% without you even looking at it. But they're still liquid, right? And so like you don't have to wait until you're 59 and a half. So, all right, here we go. Next one up.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm 23. Here's exactly how much I bring home in a paycheck on a $67K salary from my 9-to-5 job. I get paid on the 15th and 30th of every month, and my gross pay is $2,773. My deductions per paycheck include $25 between healthcare, vision, dental, and insurance. I contribute $305 per paycheck to my 401k, which is 10% of my salary, and then my employer matches 8%. I also contribute $100 per month into my HSA. My taxes per paycheck are $520, bringing my net pay after taxes and deductions $1,822. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm 20.
Okay, that was her breakdown on the $67,000 salary. What do you think?
I mean, some of those numbers, I don't know how she got there. Most companies, you got to contribute way more than $25 a paycheck to healthcare. And
I was just thinking, man, what company does she work at? What is like $25?
I mean, that's awesome. That's great. So, and then 8% match. Amazing. I don't know any company that has an 8% match, honestly. So what that's
heard.
Okay, so there you go. That's
private equity.
Yeah, oh, for sure. That 67,000 salary is more like 100 when you take those things into account.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that jumped out to me is when you got that kind of money that you're able to put in, I would load up that HSA, health savings account. Although she's 23 and she says, "Hey, I don't need this." Beautiful thing about an HSA, tax free when it goes in, tax deductible when it goes in. you can invest it, grow
Mhm.
tax free, and you can use it for medical expenses the rest of your life. So at some point, you're going to need the money. It's the best of both worlds. It's both a IRA because you get the money up, tax savings up front, but it's a Roth
Right.
IRA because it's growing tax free. I would definitely be increasing if you can do that, but I really like her company she works at. That's my first reaction.
Yeah, we should all apply there. I mean,
That's right.
$25 a week for all that was, so I guess it's maybe it's $100 a month, which is still very low.
For I think she said dental, vision, and health,
And she's single, which means that number should be way higher. But anyways,
yeah.
We digress, people. When we saw this, we just lost our minds. Okay, next one.
Leasing a car is the biggest waste of money out there.
I lease a car.
So why?
I think that I want to not have to deal with an older car, and I can lease it for a few years. It's cheaper. I don't drive it very much. I don't go over the limit, and I can turn it in and get a brand new car in 3 years.
Yes, but if you keep it the entire time and you look at the money that
What's the entire time?
and the life of it, if you take good care of it, like my car is going to be good for another
Okay.
5 years. I
Hold-
just think it's better to buy. Leasing a car.
Okay, there is a debate between Susie Orman and Chris Wallace, and who are you siding with on this one?
So all my financial planner friends are going to disagree with me and cannot believe what I'm going to say.
Uh-oh.
But depending on your values, I think leasing a car can be a really great decision. And I have both leased a car and owned a car in my life.
Yep.
And when my son is able to drive, my intention is he's going to get my car that I have now that I bought, and
Mhm.
I'm going to lease after there.
Mhm.
And why am I going to lease? I'm going to lease because I am willing to spend the money for the new
Yep.
thing.
Mhm.
And I like the idea of every 3 years having a new car and knowing I have the newest technology. That is important to me, and I'm
Mhm.
willing to spend the money for it. And it is much better financially for me to lease a car than buy a car and then sell it 3 years later.
Right.
And so if that's the case, it's all about the values piece. So
Right.
yes, mathematically, if you want to buy a car and you view a car purely as it's got to get me from point A to point B, and I want it to last as long as possible with the least amount of money, well, then that changes what you're buying significantly.
Mhm.
And you're going to buy cheap, but you're
Yep.
going to buy reliable. And
Yeah.
that's it. And that's great. You're going to hold it for 20 years.
Yeah.
But
Like-
there's a lot of people that don't do that.
It's like that's right. And I agree. Like, people think of it in the wrong way. In my opinion, I think that if you're going to buy a car, my 2 cents is that you should buy the absolute best car that you can afford to buy. That's the most reliable. That's 3 years old after.
Yeah,
it's
I was going to say
tweaking.
2. Perfect. Yeah. Whatever it is. 2, 3 years old.
Yeah. So 2 or 3 years old and get the absolutely best possible car that you can buy. So I drive a Mercedes, a C300. I love it. It's a 2015. Like
Mhm.
I test drove a 2022 last year or 2023. I can't remember, but there wasn't a significant enough
Right.
difference in how the car drove, just in a little bit of the technology inside. And so for me, I was like, there's no compelling reason. And then I have the new, it's like kind of the newer design model anyway. So like it's, it's that kind of like, it really has to be like a whole nother step up.
Absolutely.
Like in order for me to want to buy it. But I also have friends who lease, and it's just like, hey, they just like clockwork. They lease every 3 years. They love it. They don't want to. They're like, I'm not paying for maintenance, like,
No.
and blah blah blah. And I own a business. I would get a 100% tax write off, and I could do it. But at the same time, like, it's like after you pay for the car, this,
Oh,
you know,
for sure. Well, and I think the way you frame that is huge. If you're trying to have the best financial decision purely, and that's the only factor,
Right.
there's zero argument that you should buy a new car. That just doesn't make sense. Especially technology doesn't change a lot in 2 years, and so you buy a car, you buy a used car, reliable, you hold it until it dies.
Mhm.
That is the right decision if all you're looking to do is maximize or minimize the dollars you'll spend on
Sure.
a car.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, if you know you're going to do it, I've got clients that have bought cars and then a year and a half later they say, I really, really like this car though. And they go and sell it. And I'm like, you just lost all that money,
Yeah.
and they would have been better off if they leased. And
Yeah.
knowing who you are, knowing how
Mhm.
you think about it, that changes the answer.
It does. It's that mentality. Come back to that mentality again.
I'm pretty consistent if you can't tell.
Yeah, I know, right? No, it makes perfect sense to me. All right, here we go. Here's the last one.
Here are 5 money practices that I've cut out of my life as a 27-year-old with a multiple 6-figure net worth. The first one is keeping any money in a traditional savings account. So a traditional savings account pays you like 0.01% on all of the money that you have in it. They're a little bit more convenient because they come with like your checking account. So usually you get a checking account and a savings account attached to it, but they're basically a waste of space. You do not need one. You shouldn't use one. Any cash savings you have outside of the money that you're keeping in your checking account should be in a high yield savings account. Number 2, this one is a hot take, and it is that I stopped using my debit card completely. I do carry it with me just in case I need to access cash or I have an issue with my credit card or Apple Pay. But in general, for 99.9% of the purchases that I make, I'm putting them on my credit card and I'm paying my card off every 2 weeks. The reason is because with a debit card, you don't get any points. With a credit card, you can get points, you can get cash back, or different rewards on purchases you're already making that you can then use in your life to save money in other ways. So really, if you're using a debit card, you're not taking the dollars that you're spending as far as they can go. And obviously that means you need to be using your credit card responsibly. Number 3 is using any sort of buy now, pay later app or service. So I never used these really to begin with, but I know that they are very popular these days, especially amongst Gen Z, just because it makes it easier to buy things without having to front all of the money at once. But it can make using these services can make it a lot easier for you to spend money that you don't have or to get into a situation where you didn't realize how much money you've spent and how much money you owe because you only had to front like a small amount of money on a bunch of different things. And to the tune of number 3, number 4 is carrying any balance on my credit card month over month. So when I put something on my credit card, I know for a fact that I have the money in cash to pay it off. I never put anything on my credit card that I couldn't pay for in cash. And I do pay my credit card off every 2 weeks. I know some people aren't going to like that. I don't really care. My credit score is 800. It's nearly perfect. I don't think it makes a difference. And the last thing that I no longer do is spend my money on what other people want me to do, my friends' hobbies, or on things that I don't like or don't care about. This is something that I know a lot of people struggle with. And if you are someone who gives into peer pressure or you find that you're spending a lot of money on things that aren't making you feel good, you got to draw awareness to that habit, and you can do so by tracking your expenses. And also learn how to say no to things. Saying no is an art form. It gets a lot easier as you progress throughout your 20s. But if you are somebody who struggles with this, really get comfortable with just being okay with not going or saying no to something.
All right. There's some healthy tips there. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with any of those. One thing that jumped out to me immediately, she's 27, has 6-figure net worth. That is out of the norm. I know we don't want to compare, but
Sure.
she didn't do any of those things that she said not to do to get to that level. I mean,
Right.
if you are able to build the wealth that quickly and not go into debt and things like that, you already have some good discipline, some good habits. And so the only thing I would say is if you're really, really far off from there, I don't think all of those, for instance, using the credit card, I know she, prefaced that with don't carry a balance, but I know a lot of people that need to use a debit card because they're going to keep track of how much cash is in the account. And
Right.
they say, you know what, forget the points because I carry a balance, even if it's only for a month, once a year, that interest you're paying is not worth the points you're getting if
Yeah.
you're going to carry a balance. And so all really good stuff, but you have to know where you fall on the discipline, and all those are great if you got the right discipline to begin with.
Yeah. If you're sitting on a multiple 6-figure income, it's so much easier to pay your balance off every month.
Absolutely. Well, and she's made savings. She's got 6-figure net worth. I mean, she's
Yeah.
got savings in case. I mean, she didn't spend every dollar she made, even if she
Right.
made a lot of money.
Right. That's absolutely right. And yeah, I mean, I think that, again, the point that you're making is that you have to look at your own specific circumstance. And much like the car, do the absolute most you can in your category that you're in at the time, and recognize that categories change if you've educated yourself, if you move, if wherever, if your life circumstances change, if someone in your life dies and leaves you money. Like, a lot of this stuff changes over time, and it will change if for you too. So, like, don't. And the other thing is, you're like, when you make more or less money, there may be opportunities for you at either of those ends to
Right.
make a change. And I think that taking a holistic look at it and kind of refining and talking to someone like you makes a big difference. Like, having mentorship and guidance. And the more money you make, I think it's more important to have professional guidance.
Yeah, everything gets more complicated, and it's easier to make mistakes, and those mistakes cost a lot more, right? And
Yeah.
also the opportunities are a lot more. One thing that I think is just, it's part of the human condition, is we all think things are going to stay the same. And the way that it is now is the way it will always be. And that's both on a positive and a negative. One thing I guide a lot of my clients is recognizing, okay, we only have so much control, right, over the future. You can control your actions, you control your mindset, but building in a little extra fluff, a little extra cash, a little extra flexibility is really important, because we have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring for any of us. And I think that's an important thing to just take away, regardless of income level. If you have enough money that you can save a little bit more, let's not try to optimize to the cent. Let's optimize to the thousand, and let's at least have a little extra, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Incomes change. Like, you can make $300,000 a year at a job for 5 years, and then that 6th year, massive layoff comes, and now you're back down to 125, and you have to make those adjustments. So that makes a lot of sense. So, Ben, where can people who are watching this today contact you if they're interested in linking up with you and utilizing your service?
Yeah, there's two places I would direct people. So one is, if you're interested in downloading our free ebook on how to talk to kids about money, you can just go to dollarsandkids.com, all spelled out, dollarsandkids.com, and it's free. And it's just a short little, like, 6-page ebook on different ages, money principles you can teach. I think that's hopefully really valuable. And then we got a lot of information on our website, both for business owners and, on a personal finance side, illuminatewm.com. WM is in wealth management, illuminatewm.com. And you can find all of our blogs and everything else there.
Awesome. And you've articulated your strategies really well today, and I appreciate that. And I think it's going to be a really big boon to the people who are watching. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was fun.
All right, folks. And remember, if you don't go about doing your business, you're going to be doing the business of someone else. Until next time, he's Ben, I'm Micah, and we're out of here.